Welcome to Herald-Standard.com editorial board. My name is Mark O'Keefe. I'm executive editor for Herald-Standard.com. With us today is State Representative Tim Mahoney. And Tim is here today to talk about the school consolidation issue, something that's certainly stirred a lot of interest in the area. There was a recent study done looking in depth at this, and I believe you have some of the folks who were instrumental in the study, if you want to maybe introduce them. And
well, first of all, I'd like to thank you all for having us here today. And I wouldn't come alone because I wanted to bring the professionals that did the study, because when it comes to this study, it's 137 pages and it's in depth. But we hired the Education Management Group LLC out of Chambersburg, I think it is, right, Don? Where's your location?
Sugarloaf.
Sugarloaf. But they're the only management company, education company, that's done a consolidation in the last 20 years in Pennsylvania that worked. And by doing that, we went one step further, and we tried this study in Fayette County as probably the first one in the state of Pennsylvania, if I'm correct, Don, right?
Yes.
That we studied just all the school districts in the county, all 6 school districts. And the study came out pretty good as far as the numbers. But let me introduce Dr. Don Boyer. He's the senior management guy with the firm. And he can introduce who he brought with him.
Dr. Nancy Neal and Mr. Bob Heater.
So if you will go
for
ahead, questions.
Yeah. Well, if you maybe wanted to talk just in brief about the study, and
Well, let me talk a little bit brief about Fayette County and where we're at in Fayette County. We have 6 school districts, and we're going to go into a crisis in the next year or 2 years. It's definitely coming. There's no heading it off. People are going to lose their jobs. And education is going to, the classrooms are going to explode. And if we don't do something, I'm not saying to do this study, I'm just saying something needs to be done. Because as the study will show you, there's over a $15 million shortfall for next year's June 30th budget for the school districts. And where are you going to get the money for that? I mean, there's only 2 ways you can get the money. You can raise taxes, but you only can raise them 2.4%. So that doesn't even do anything for the 15 million. So where else will they go for, the money? They're going to they have to go for layoffs or cutting services to the schools. And that's why I wanted to put another proposal out there to let the people in Fayette County have input, especially the taxpayers, the people that are paying for the property tax bills. And it came back, the study came back very successful. And if, I'm open for any ideas. If anyone wants to bring anything to the table, we're open to trying to make a difference in education in Fayette County. And because we're on the verge of, while we're doing it, we have a Ponzi scheme here in Fayette County. It's just about ready to explode because there's no more money to get. If people think that the state's going to keep throwing money in next year and a year after and a year after, they're not. They've laid off 14,000 educators and people that worked in school districts last year in the state of Pennsylvania. And the current administration, Governor Corbin's administration, has not came to the rescue on any of those school districts. And he's not going to come to the rescue on Fayette County school districts. So, and a matter of fact, if he gets the voucher bill passed, which it passed through the Senate last week in one day, it passed through the Senate, 28 to 22, I think it was. And it's coming to the House next week or the next time we go into session, and it's going to pass, hopefully not that quickly, but they had the votes to pass it. And that's another attack on public education. This $15 million will grow overnight if that happens. And I mean, everyone just needs to be aware of that we are in a crisis. I mean, this is the biggest issue in Fayette County, and this is what we need to address. Dawn?
Well, I concur with everything you said. I think one has to go back and look at the rather substantial loss in enrollment that the school districts have had over this last decade. And they've lost, in essence, the equivalent of the current enrollment of Fraser and Brownsville put together. They're projected to lose hundreds more students over the next 10 years. On top of that, two of the districts, when they finished their financial operations 2 years ago, the audit or the annual financial report for last school year was due on Friday in the department, so we're going back a year from that. Brownsville at that point in time had a $2.4 million deficit. Uniontown area had a $1 million deficit. And they all adopted budgets that were out of balance. With the exception, well, they were all out of balance. For example, Uniontown's budget, the revenue did not cover the expenditures. They were about $7.5 million short. So that means for next year to finish with maintain the status quo would take another $7.5 million, and they had a $15 million surplus. So if it's implemented that way, they're broke. And that's the most extreme case, but no district in the area really had a balanced budget. So the funds aren't there. The alternative aren't many. You can raise taxes up to the index. You could put it on a referendum to exceed the index.
And that, you know,
Or
that's
you
not
can cut
going to happen.
expenses. I mean, there's no magic to this. So that's the current condition.
One of the things that you hear is in terms of with county school district is about the centralization of power, the loss of local control. But the county school districts have been utilized, I believe, in Maryland and Virginia, some other.
I believe 32 states.
Yes.
in that
Actually, we had county school districts in Pennsylvania prior to 1966.
Well, how does it necessarily, how does it work in, say, like Maryland, in terms of how many people are on the school board and what their jurisdiction is, or, you know, and how do you envision it working here?
Well, the number of, unless there's a change in the school code, all the school districts now have to have 9 school directors. And they have to be elected based on the population. So there would have to be election districts drawn up.
Or would it just be, they would just run at large, pretty much, wouldn't they?
No,
Well, they could do that, or you could, under the current law,
I know
you
that
have
they've
3
tried
options.
I know they've tried the region thing, but that's pretty much all been thrown out because it's very hard to maintain the one man, one vote thing.
But I think in
the regions.
this instance that we would try to do the regional thing because we want to have a fair representation for each school district, you know, through the population. Because we only have 6 school districts, and we want to make sure their identities are kept alone, that they are who they are. So, you know, you have 6 school districts and 9 board members, so there will be some overlapping. But that's the only way that you'd be able to implement that school administration board in this county, I believe.
How many do they have in like Maryland, where they have the county? Is it 9 there too?
I'm not really familiar with that. All of them are different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do know Virginia, they have the county, I think the county school board is 11, but they have a county administration, just like what we're trying to do here is they have their high school, all the high schools are still have their own identity and are still run like a different district, but they're run from one centralized pot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the savings is going to really be.
Well, have you heard that though, talk? People are afraid that there's going to be too much, you're going to lose the local.
I'm hearing pros and cons on both issues. I mean, people are talking about they're going to lose their jobs if we do this, but people got to understand there's going to be a lot of jobs lost if we don't do something. And the education is going to be lost if we don't do something. At least this plan will, help the teachers and implement education the way education was in 2003. I think 14 per 1, right, ratio?
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
Prior to 1966, there were approximately 3,000 school districts in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, a lot of them voluntarily got together and formed jointures. But in 1966, we went from almost 3,000 down to 505. And the same argument was made back at that time. There's going to be a loss of local control, and ever since 66, you don't hear that as an issue. It was not an issue in Center and Monaca, in Beaver County, which is the school district we're talking about. Nor is it currently an issue in Woodland Hills, which is a court-created school district. The federal courts said in around the 1970s, somewhere I believe, that could have been the early 80s, I'm not sure of the date. But at any rate, the federal court took 5 districts and created one out of it, namely Woodland Hills. And initially that, again, was kind of an issue, but it's really accepted, and it's been operating as a district ever since that time.
Do you think that pretty much the fears would go away over time with something like
Yes,
this?
that's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're really not taking the local impact out of it because you are electing 9 people to a new board that are from Fayette County that will make the decisions on, a new school per se administration on how they're going to set it up. And I mean, but you got to realize, if we would have had this on a referendum this year, we could have saved $35 million this year. And that's real money. I mean, between the savings that he identified and plus the $15 million that they're in a debt, if we could have changed this coming year, we could have saved $35 million. And I've never heard of any school district in the state of Pennsylvania ever giving tax money back to every person in Fayette County. If we will only give $10 million back out of the $20 million of savings and put the other $10 million into education, and where we can float a big bond and try to get these projects done that we do need in some of these high schools like Laura Highlands, like the tech school, and try to come up to a state-of-an-art education in Fayette County and being on the verge of really changing Pennsylvania as education as people perceive it. I mean, it's just, I just believe it's the only direction we can go in.
Well, let's talk about the referendum. You did try and put this question on a referendum.
Yeah.
The court that was challenged by residents in Fayette County, judge did side with the residents and
Yeah.
said that, and I guess basically it seemed like the problem was that what the state has said or whatever is that school districts they're the ones who have to initiate the
Well,
merger.
see, there was just one little thing I met with the Department of Ed when Rendell was still governor, and they give me this one little loophole. I don't want to say a loophole. I mean, it was legal, but it wasn't just like an end around if you're playing football. If we would have got it on the referendum, it would have been up to the court to decide after the vote would have been taken. The two people challenged it, and they had the right to do what they did. But I had almost maybe 3,200 people sign a petition saying they would like to have it. People need to have a voice in their money, what they're spending. But on the other hand, the judge ruled the way he's seen it, and it is what it is. That's not saying that I won't try it again another year from now or 2 years from now, but all I know is that we got a house of cards that's ready to fall financially, and if we don't address it, we are going to be in worse shape than the Duquesne school district, school district. We'll have the state coming in trying to take over our school districts, and that's one thing we want to avoid. If we really want to try to educate these kids the right way and an honest way, then I just believe that we just need to go in a different direction.
Well, in terms of referendum, so you have another idea?
I have another idea. I met with the Department of Ed, and I met with a couple of attorneys, and there's another way of doing it, and we're looking into how to do it that way. But it'd be so much easier if the school boards, the 6 school boards in Fayette County, would get together, look at this study, look at the situation they're in, and let's do the right thing for the kids and education in Fayette County and for the teachers that teach these kids. Because if we don't do that soon, I don't want to be one to say, I told you so in a year from now, or June 30th when they're trying to raise taxes and go into a referendum trying to get exclusions which aren't there anymore.
So basically, you're hoping that the school board members that are on the school boards now will either do it on their own, or that that they will be impressed with the study and what you're trying to show.
I'm hoping that will happen. We're going to meet with all the new school boards after this election. We're going to have a town hall meeting for school boards and administration and whoever else wants to come. I didn't tell you about that one. That's the last one we're doing. It's at the State Theater. I don't know. I don't have the date yet. I mean, we just need to get this out. We need the school board, and I challenge the school boards to all come and really, ask the questions that they want the answers. They need the answers too, and don't go with the rumors. Don't feed into all the BS of it. It just, I'm here to get ideas and give ideas, and that's what we did with this study.
And so basically then too, maybe if you could get people that would buy into the study, that maybe they themselves could run for the school board and end up 2 years from now.
Yeah, something has to be done. If we don't address it now, I'm sure the state's going to be addressing it in 2 years.
How do you feel about people that are attacking you personally over this whole issue?
I can understand that. Because there's going to be jobs lost, but there's going to be jobs lost anyway because of the shortfalls they're going to have next year. So, I'm a big boy. I got broad shoulders. I can handle the attacks. It's not the most political correct thing to do, but in my opinion, I think it's the right thing to do because, if we're not for kids in Fayette County and trying to educate our kids to stay in Fayette County, then why the hell am I in this job?
One of the things that obviously is, and probably would be the most controversial part of it is you do recommend, the study recommends closing a number of schools, and we know that any time you talk about closing schools in Fayette County a few years ago, Connellsville,
Well, it's
they talked about closing schools, and then you got people that ended up running for the school board, and they ended up voting out the people who were in favor of closing those schools.
Anytime you have a small area with the school board, correct me if I'm wrong, it's so hard to close schools. But if you had a county-wide board, they'll do the right thing and address the right school situation and the number of schools. And I don't think local politics would be able to come into play with that then. Am I right or wrong?
Oh, I think you're absolutely correct with that. Nowhere in this study does it suggest that any high schools are going to be closed. That was one of the givens from the very beginning, that all 6 high schools would continue to operate just the way they are. The school buildings that would in all probability be closed would be smaller elementary or middle or junior high schools. I mean, Connellsville has been arguing about which junior high school to close for years. On which side of the river are we going to continue to operate one? I don't know if they've ever resolved that problem, but I know some of us have looked at that back in the early 90s, and that seemed to be a stumbling block. But I think people have to be cognizant of the fact that some of these schools are getting too small to offer any kind of good education to their students.
Let me go back just a little bit before, because this group's going to be getting attacked tonight at these town hall meetings of who are they to come into Fayette County. Almost all 5 of these educators in this group has worked for all 6 of these school districts at one time or another in the past. Am I right?
I believe that's correct.
But so they can't. The qualifications of this study, of this group that did this study, can't even come into play. I mean, then why? What I'm trying to get to there. Why would they question somebody they hired in the past? So that's another reason is why we went with this group.
Well, in terms of the closing of the schools, are you looking at it in terms of maybe when school enrollment at a particular school maybe drops to a certain level, that should be kind of targeted, or do you look at maybe the geographics of it, or the location, or is it pretty much just the enrollment?
No, I think you have to consider all of those factors. There are cases, for example, in a K-4 school where you may have, let's for example say 175 pupils in that range. There are too many students to have only one class per grade, but when you get into the 2 classes per grade, they get too small. And it creates some inequities in more highly populated school attendance areas in terms of class size, and that's one thing that a lot of school districts have been ignoring, is the effort to try and provide equity for all the students. And in certain grades like kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade, class size is an important factor. And you don't really provide the opportunities to the children if you can have a kindergarten with 17 students, or in another case it might be 25. There's a detriment created there to the children in the larger class size buildings. So that's one of the primary factors. But you can't afford to have the other kinds of facilities. either. Cafeterias and libraries, those kinds of things.
Sports staff, I guess, would be somewhat of an issue too.
And then they're traveling from school to school just so you can meet the state requirements, which is an ineffective way of doing it.
I guess part of the issue too might be that maybe people don't even know how big some of these schools are. I know I was kind of surprised in looking at some of these schools, how much the enrollment has dropped in some of these schools over the years. So yeah, you could have like some schools are like have more kids and you got more kids per class, and then others are, yeah, they're having a low classroom thing. So it probably is good for people to get the information and be aware of what's going on in some of these other schools.
Almost definitely, but it's like what the plan says, you know, the grade schools, if you could try to run them as a county-wide group, you know, where there's a lot of grade schools where kids are right on the border, that one grade school in, say, Laura Highlands is closer to their house, and they're traveling all the way across town to go to another, and it comes down to transportation, how much money you can save in transportation through with these grade schools, and it's definitely going to be a savings when it's all said and done.
So you might be able to equalize the enrollment.
Yeah, you can
way.
equalize enrollment. You can have the teachers can you know, be shared throughout the county, and there's just so many things that could develop out of a plan like this if we can get these school boards to come together and come up with their own plan on you know, trying to save at least $15 million so we don't have to raise taxes and God only knows what.
Well, do you think that you talk about the decrease in the school enrollment, and obviously Fayette County took a pretty big hit in the recently completed census, lost about 12,000 people, 8%. Do you think that that's kind of hit home with people, or did people kind of realize that, or do people still seem to think that things are just going to continue like they did 20 years ago? You know,
it's not 20 years ago. I mean, the education that we're teaching kids like we taught them 20 years ago. We need to get into the future and teach the kids for the future. But I think the study in the next 10 years is expecting another decline of 1,800 per the county. So, you know, it's not looking, you know, rosy in the next 10 years, but we can make it look rosy if we just change direction.
well, as far as the projections, I guess kind of on one hand, I mean, I guess it's somewhat scientific, but it may not be totally scientific since nobody really has a real crystal ball of what's going to happen. But isn't it quite possible that it could even be more than what you're projecting? I mean, isn't it possible you could be reaching kind of a tipping point here in
We've
Fayette
looked
County?
at the projections two ways in the study. There are two different sets. The one that's going to be mentioned in the presentations over the next several weeks are essentially produced by the State Education Department. And usually the first 5 years of projections are relatively accurate. The system they use is based on live births and a retention rate that's calculated by the number of kids that go from one grade to the next, and there's a good history of that. The problem in making these projections and going beyond 5 years is to project the birth rate. And the PDE projections use a technique called linear regression, which is, simply put, if it's going up, it continues to go up at the same rate. If it's going down, it continues to decline at the same rate. Others kind of try to level that out. But no matter how you look at the projections, they are going down.
Now, I had a guy call the other day when he was reading the study. He said, well, how about the gas industry? All those jobs that are coming from Oklahoma and Texas. And I told him, quite frankly, I said, hopefully the people from Oklahoma and Texas are gone by now, and the people who are here are, going to be employed in that industry, and their kids are already here. So, it's a tit for tat when when you're talking about, enrollment going up or down. But I don't know. I just get so frustrated on how to approach this with trying to sell it to the public, where the public really understands the study itself, and that's hopefully what we're going to try to accomplish in the next 2 weeks.
One of the factors that exists is that families aren't having as many children as they did in the past. And I don't see any change taking place there. It's true in most of the counties in the state of Pennsylvania.
And I guess, we really, it's just so hard to say with the gas industry because they've been bringing so many people in. So we really don't know, are any of these people going to stay? And you kind of look at it, what they say is that for the most part, the drilling and stuff it's a short-term thing. It's not a long, term thing.
They don't put their roots down here.
Right. So you kind of wonder, and even you could get people trained here, and then 5 years from now they move to the next boom or whatever. So it's really hard to hard to tell. Well, in terms of the VOTEC, and that's kind of another kind of controversial thing, where you're saying that basically instead of 2 VOTECs in the county, that we should just have 1. And is that, based on your experience, is that something that is kind of most counties just have 1 VOTEC? Is it kind of unique where a small county like Fayette does have 2, or?
Well, there are no hard, fast rules to that, but essentially vocational technical schools in Pennsylvania are supposed to base their curriculum on the labor market and look at the jobs that are existing in the area and then set up programs to train people for those kinds of jobs. And I believe the first time we looked at anything in Fayette County was probably in Brownsville, as I recall. And the labor market statistics there indicated that the largest, I'm doing this from memory, so I could be incorrect, but I believe they're in service industries such as healthcare, this kind of thing, and that's basically a function of the aging population that we're getting. Manufacturing and those kinds of technical jobs just aren't being created here. Now the gas industry may well do that, but so far there are no projections out of the Department of Labor as to what effect that's going to have on Fayette County.
I know that in the study that the report said, I think it was $2 million if you close the career school in Connellsville, and 1.5 if you closed the one out in Georges Township. But also said that the potential savings do not include potential costs for any new programming or the absorption into the program of more students in the remaining school. And what are the options for accommodating students for both schools? Will there follow-up studies be done to determine if closing one of those career schools is cost effective, including data on transportation costs and possibly more staffing?
I think you have to go back to our premise when we looked at that in the first place. This is how a group of 5 people would implement things. Concept is to show that it can work financially and it can work for the betterment of the educational program. Any change that would have to be implemented would have to be done by a new board. And this is viewed as a starting point for a board. That they're the ones that would have to take what we kind of suggested and see how feasible it is, or are there other ways of accomplishing it locally? And I think you'll find that in some of the vocational technical schools, high schools, if they're of sufficient size, are offering those programs themselves. And the nature of vocational education is changing. There's a program that's nationally recognized called Project Lead the Way. And they're putting more emphasis on training people with science and math skills and preparing them for high-tech jobs, in essence, as opposed to the older curriculum that dealt with welders and carpenters and bricklayers and that kind of thing. So there's an evolution that has to take place here. And a person with a good technical background today, an auto mechanic, for example, that's certified, etc., probably earns more to start than most college graduates. So it's not that you're trying to teach people a skill because they don't have the technical ability to learn the other. The emphasis is what kind of jobs are we going to need in the 21st century or 22nd century, and how are we going to prepare people to do that? And I think it's kind of obvious that they're going to be more technical and more highly skilled than they've been in the past.
Tim, I'm sure you're kind of aware of there's a bit of controversy
It's
between
ongoing.
the FAPEN Economic Development Council and the VOTEC school, and the FAPEN folks wanted to build a new kind of VOTEC school out by Penn State Fayette, and they said this would be more modern equipment and that sort of thing. Right now the VOTEC for South Fayette is looking at the possibility of expanding and doing some renovation, and they want the board members to kick into it. I think all of them except Uniontown have agreed to kick into that. Have you urged this? Have you heard anything from any of the
I've heard it from
VOTEC?
I've heard it from both sides. And in my opinion, and I'm not here to push FAPEN's plan or anything, but my opinion is that you need to build a new technical school that is under control of a new board of education in Fayette County, one board. And I believe that you need to build that school where they can go to class there, and where they can go to the technical school there, where they can go to their STEM school there, and possibly even go to night college courses there. But that's cutting edge, and we would have enough money out of the study to do something like that, as far as brick and mortar building the school and putting both those schools together, but making them an all-day school as far as education. And I just think that we need to start educating the kids at those tech schools to the jobs that we have here in this area.
There are vocational technical schools in several counties that work very closely with community colleges. I believe Beaver County is probably the closest one that I'm aware of here, where there's a campus. The VOTEC school and the community college exist side by side. That was the case in Center Monaca.
And if you put the school in the center of the county, the direct center of the county, the transportation would be a lot easier for, to get the kids there from any point of the county.
The Carbon-Lehigh one outside of Allentown is perhaps the more progressive of the two, but there the community college is on the same campus. So students can actually go to either one of them. And especially with community colleges now, we do have dual enrollment programs in Pennsylvania. There are a lot of college and high school courses that are currently available where the student can get the college credit right in the high school. Now you can develop those in concert with individual colleges where they control the course content, that kind of thing. But that's not unusual, and it's occurring all over the place. And this is the kind of direction that I think we had in mind when we made these recommendations.
What kind of resistance do you think they have?
Well, it's the unknown. It's change. That's what the resistance is. Is, you know, people are, you know, they want to talk about change, but when change is there, they're scared of it. I believe that you know, if we could do it, would be like a 7th high school in our county that could educate kids for certain needs. And I mean, it's going to have resistance. Everything we're talking about is going to have resistance. People don't want these imaginary lines here. They don't like to cross them too much, but
It's
something's going to get crossed within a year or two.
yeah. You know, we had a recent letter to the editor, and it talked about you know, the Steve Neubauer, that he's on the board chairman for Fay Penn. He was talking about the VOTEC school. And I really think he really wasn't criticizing the kids or the school or anything. He was obviously trying to advocate for some type of a new building, but everybody seems so defensive about this, and we've had teachers write and students write, and I don't think anybody wants to be critical of the students or the teachers. They're obviously trying to do the best they can, and obviously we know that there's a lot of good students everywhere, so we would think that there would be good kids out there, but you know,
I mean, I don't even think it's about the students or the educators. I think it's about trying to change people's philosophy on how we should educate these kids and what we should offer them for the future. We can't just offer them, you know, to be a hairdresser or whatever, which is fine, but we have to be able to offer them, you know, to work on computers, to work, I mean, all the high-tech stuff, to work in the gas industry, to work in the defense industry that's here. And
I think if people would sit down and think about their automobile and compare that to the automobile of 20 years ago, it was not uncommon for people to fix their own cars. Now it's virtually impossible. You have to take, and it's impossible for the local mechanic to repair cars today. They don't have the computer equipment that diagnoses what's wrong with it. So it's a whole other way of life, and it's getting a lot worse. Cars today self-diagnose. You talk to them, you tell them what to do. By the same token, it's the same way in the garage. The local mechanic doesn't have to listen to see if the timing's set right and that kind of thing. They hook it up to certain computer things and it prints out what's wrong with it. And then they don't try to repair parts, they just put a new one on. So it's a totally different mentality than it had been in the past. And I think schools are probably the last people to recognize that. And I'm not only talking vocational schools, I'm talking about schools in general. Don't recognize that.
what about the kind of been mentioned in the study about cyber schools or the charter schools?
Well, of course, vouchers are going to increase that. And the best way to prevent the loss of pupils is to become more like a cyber school yourself. And there are some high schools in Pennsylvania, mostly in the Lancaster County area, and I believe that have in fact established their own cyber school. And if you look at the state standards and the technology that's out there, it's not that difficult. But again, it depends on how people begin to look at education. I would venture to say that most of the schools in this county, and all counties for that matter, in the high schools still are operating under what used to be called the Carnegie unit, that a class had to meet 45 minutes a day for 5 days a week. That hasn't been the law in Pennsylvania since the early 70s, but yet that's the way we still function. And it's no longer working in most cases. If you look at students today, most of them have access to some kind of electronic device, whether it's a Nook or a Kindle or a computer or even a cell phone. They know how to use those things better than most of us. Then I guess you could ask the question, why aren't schools utilizing that to better educate kids? And that's where the whole thing is going. I mean, look at the publishing industry with the advent of electronic books, what's happening. I think last year was the first year that there were more electronic books than there were hard copy books printed. But yet, we're not trying to capitalize on that. There are probably tremendous cost reductions in that as well. We haven't even looked at any of that. But by getting a larger overall district, you can afford to get into some of these things. And I think if you look at it, test scores would go up and costs would come down.
And the curriculum would be the same across the county, which it isn't,
That's
it isn't
correct.
now.
But apparently, according to state mandates, students who do not choose, they don't have to choose the cyber school in their home school districts, unless they're free to choose an outside online cyber school with usually a much higher cost to the school district. With the state mandates and the state pushing for school choice, how would they?
I think that's where the legislation needs to be changed, where they can go to the nearest, they're required to go to the nearest qualified cyber or charter school.
I guess the hope would be too that maybe if the cyber school was big enough or good enough or whatever, that maybe kids would just go there, they would be satisfied or whatever.
Well, hopefully we could address that in legislation, but I mean, that's just another avenue that we're going to have to hit after the school board or a new school board would take place.
How much of an effect the cyber schools are having a pretty big effect on the?
I think $4 million through this county. It went out of this county last year. You know, it's nothing to sneeze at, but and if vouchers come in, I think it's going to double.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're in a situation that it's not a pleasant situation to be in, and I mean, change is going to happen. It's either we change or someone's going to change us down the road, and at least we'll have opportunity to change our direction if we do it. Down the road, it might be a little different.
No, we could probably sit, talk here all day, but I don't know if any of you two wanted to say anything or add anything, or any other questions from members of our editorial board out there? You have anything you?
Man, that's first.
Tim,
No, I mean, in closing.
You had a question.
okay, yeah, I just, you know, you threw out that $35 million savings. Where'd you get that number from?
The $35 million, if we could have put it in place this year, the schools are already projected to have over a $15 million shortfall before June 30th of this year. So if we could have put this in place, that would have went away, plus we'd have had the $20 million in savings. So totally, really, you're talking $35 million in real money, but in actuality, it's $20 million.
But where are these savings coming from? I mean,
The savings that the $20 million savings.
Where's the $20 million?
You want to read that off?
Yeah, we've identified them if I can.
This is a conservative number too.
Well, basically, the first thing we looked at that would cause a rather substantial savings is combining the administrative staffs of each of the current school districts into one. And if you look at the total number of students in this particular county, there would be 17,920. That's how many were here in 2010-11. There are probably fewer than that now. That's no larger than several school districts in Pennsylvania, not counting Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. Allentown, Reading, and Bethlehem are all in that same size. And so if you would take the county and staff it, for example, as the Reading School District is staffed, you could save millions of dollars in doing that. We looked at approximately 3.4 million, and then the supporting administrative secretarial staff and that kind of thing would produce another 693,000. We also looked at the pupil-teacher ratio, or I should say the professional employee to student ratio. And if you went back to the year 2003-04 and would staff the schools maintaining that same ratio, now you could save approximately 7.1 million. We looked at closing some small schools. We looked at transportation. We also looked at, the transportation, if you would operate it and design routes as one large system, you could eliminate a minimum of 47 vehicles. And the savings on that, this is very conservative, is 1.9 million. That sort of thing. So we took all of those sorts of things, put them together, and identified some $20 million dollars in savings. Shut this thing off.
Your phone's going off the one.
At any rate, this is basically where this 20 comes from. I think it's rather conservative, and it's not touching any of the secondary schools.
I mean, we just touched on making the curriculum across the county, how much cheaper that would be if we would do that, if we had one curriculum, you know. There's just so many things unseen here that a new board would be able to identify.
Okay, any other?
Yeah, I just have an observation, maybe we can discuss it just briefly. It appears like if we have a county-wide board, they'd be able to make the hard decisions a little bit easier.
You're right, you're
Because
exactly right.
oftentimes what I've seen is when it becomes really local, then it becomes more political. And then it's either unwilling or unable to make the right decision.
And you're
So
right on there.
it takes the emotion out of it. We're making decisions that are going to occur. And I think the other point too that I've advocated for the longest time, change is going to occur. You can guarantee it. It's pretty clear cut here. It is going to occur regardless. Let's have a hand in shaping it.
You're exactly right, and that's what I'm trying to get across to, you know, the common person that really needs to push this issue is, you know, let's be ahead of the curve for the first time in Pennsylvania, you know, and try to go in our own direction on educating our kids. But at the same time, trying to save taxpayers' money and trying to save, you know, teachers' jobs, which, you know, if we just keep going the way it is, say that they have to come up with the $15 million. Okay, now next year, come, you know, school time, who gets laid off? I mean, it's not going to go to the top. It's going to start at the bottom and then it'll edge your way up to the educators. You know, they'll start at the janitors, cafeteria workers, then up to to school teachers, not the administrators. So, I just think we've been going down a wrong road too long, and the road's coming to a dead end.
Any other questions out there?
And Bill, you're exactly right. I mean, change is coming. It's either going to be our way, or it's going to be the state's way, or somebody else's way, but it's definitely coming.
Especially with the vouchers, if they become more pronounced in the county, my goodness, they erode public education.
Oh, it decimates it. And it's happening. It's going to happen. It sailed through the Senate one day, not a day and a half, one day. It went straight through. Now it's coming to the House next week or the week after. And you could see by the reapportionment thing that happened yesterday. The new administration is attacking education. He definitely is attacking the unions and education, and we can put a crimp in his attack in Fayette County. Might not affect anywhere else in the state, but we can have our own direction in Fayette County if we can come down, sit down as a people, as school board members, and as administrators. I mean, we could, there's a possibility if you could have a buyout, a 30-year and out. There's so much money that you could play with here, to get rid of some of the older teachers and that'll save you money. There's just so much. There's just so many avenues you can go that we need to really look at this. And I'm just hoping everyone involved will look at it.
Any other comments? Okay, well, I want to thank Tim Mahoney for coming in and agreeing to meet with us, and also for bringing your consultants for the study. It's good to have the people who actually did the study here, and we certainly appreciate them taking their time and coming in and sharing the expertise.
He can explain it a little easier than I can. But I appreciate the Herald-Standard for giving us this opportunity, because I think it is this is probably the most important thing in Fayette County that we need to deal with.
I would certainly agree with that. I want to thank you out there for watching. My name is Mark O'Keefe. I'm Executive Editor for Herald-Standard.com. We'll see you later.